Now I invite Kaylee Triplett to come forward to light the chalice and lead us in our affirmation of covenant, which is in your order of service.
I light this chalice with these words. Open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Open our minds to learn what is true. Open our hearts to love one another. Please join me in saying our affirmation of covenant, which you can find printed in your order of service, saying, Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other. Thank you.
You might know some version or other of a tale called The Star Thrower. In its most common form, an old man walks along a beach and encounters a young boy picking up starfish from the sand and throwing them back into the sea. He asks the boy why he is doing this. The sun is up and the tide is going out. If I don't throw them in, they'll die. The old man replies, but there are miles and miles of beach and starfish all along it. You can't possibly make a difference. The boy bends down, picks up another starfish, throws it in the sea, past the breaking waves. Made a difference for that one. This story seems to have come from the pen of Joel Barker, a business consultant. In his telling, the star thrower is a young man, not a boy, and the man who encounters him is described not as old, but as wise. Barker prefaces his story by telling us that it was inspired by an essay by Loren Eiseley, the eminent educator, philosopher, anthropologist, and natural science writer. Eiseley told a similar story in his essay, but quite different in tone and meaning. I shall come back to that. First, I want to tell you about a different star thrower. Back in the 1960s, a decade or so before Eiseley's essay was published, a scientist named Bob Payne studied tide pools on the Pacific coast in Washington state. He came out to the beach regularly and cleared out all the starfish from a particular tide pool, picking them out of it and throwing them back into the sea. Tide pools, he recognized, were naturally occurring miniature ecosystems where a variety of creatures coexisted. With other tide pools serving as controls for his experiment, he removed from his chosen tide pool the top predators, the starfish, to see what would happen. What happened was that over time, the ecosystem in the tide pool collapsed. Where there had been many different creatures surviving together, there remained only one, the one the starfish ate: mussels. He also tried removing other creatures from neighboring tide pools, only removing the starfish had so dramatic an effect. He theorized that in any ecosystem, there was one species whose presence, more than any other, kept the balance that allowed a diversity of species to survive there together. He coined the term Keystone species to name this phenomenon. In the following decades, several other scientists observed it in various kinds of ecosystems: tide pools, kelp forests, freshwater streams, tropical forests, each of them creating an experiment with controls and finding this result. And these discoveries led to something you might have heard of, the successful restoration of the ecosystem in Yellowstone National Park by reintroducing wolves there. In most cases, the keystone species was a predator in all the experiments so far. The long accepted theory was that ecosystems were built from the bottom up, like a pyramid. The bottom layer of the pyramid is the plant life, the middle layer is the herbivores, the top layer, the predators. It was thought that the predators protected the plants by controlling the herbivores. But soon after our star throwers tide pool experiments, another scientist, Tony Sinclair, began studying the Serengeti Plain in East Africa on his way to making a surprising discovery. At that time, the Serengeti was relatively unknown to Western science. I remember as a boy growing up watching TV specials about this great new area of, research, the Serengeti Plain. Sinclair was starting with the basics, identifying and counting the animals in the plain. What stood out most in his data was an extraordinary increase in the wildebeest population. When he reported his data to local ranchers, they worried that the wildebeest threatened the ecological balance of the plain and wanted to cull their numbers. Sinclair, however, thought he was seeing an ecological recovery, not a collapse, and managed to persuade the ranchers to wait and see with him. From about 250,000, the wildebeest population reached a plateau of 1.4 million, and Sinclair's intuition was borne out. Wildebeest, it seems, are picky eaters. Do you know anybody like that? Sinclair always saw zebras near them. The zebras graze the older grass, clearing it away to expose new shoots that the wildebeest prefer. Between them, the zebras and the wildebeest strip the land of grass, and they have to move on to find more food. The land they graze has less fuel for fires, and that allows more trees to get established. The trees draw larger herbivores, giraffes, elephants, as well as birds, and these in turn draw predators such as lions and hyenas. The wildebeest and the other smaller herbivores that go with them, the zebras, the gazelles, and so on, migrate more than 600 miles in a year. The predators don't migrate. It turns out that the major cause of wildebeest death is starvation. Limited grass levels off their population. That's what controls them. Not the predator, the grass. Bottom layer of the pyramid. But unless they reach 1.4 million population that the grass allows, all the other species diversity disappears. The trees that came back during Sinclair's study hadn't been seen on the plain since the 1800s. Nor had there been giraffes, elephants, lions, and hyenas as the Serengeti today is famous for. Here, the keystone species, as I say, was not the predator. The key to species diversity and abundance on the Serengeti is one of its herbivores, the wildebeest. And you might remember a certain public figure saying that in order to control wildfires in California, We need to go into the forest with brooms and sweep out the dead leaves. You remember that? This is the kind of thinking that led the Serengeti ranchers to want to cull the wildebeest herds. Today's scientific consensus is that stewardship of the environment does not have to be like keeping house, all up to human effort. Rather, if we get to know our non-human neighbors and how they contribute to ecological balance and abundance, our interventions, if needed, can be collaborative rather than controlling. We can learn to intervene in ways that promote self-sustaining, abundant ecosystems. We can allow our non-human neighbors to live the path that gave Henry Thoreau such delight. When nature condescends to make use of me without my knowledge, he wrote, I feel as though I had done something for the commonweal. And so he had. And so all species do. The discovery of keystone species helps us to know how to be in right relationship with nature. The discovery that the keystone species in a given ecosystem is not always the predator challenges an idea often embedded in our thinking about ecosystems. Freshwater biologist Mary Power recognized that predators instill fear and postulated that a landscape of fear was part of ecological balance. I think that what we learn about ecological balance may have analogs in economic equilibrium, and I resist the idea that fear is so important to ecosystems or economics as to be essential. I plan to take up this subject next month on the Sunday nearest the IRS deadline. Always a good time to reflect on the political economy. But now, back to Loren Eiseley's essay, The Star Thrower, where he described his walk on the beach after a storm. Ahead of me, over the projecting point, a gigantic rainbow of incredible perfection had sprung shimmering into existence. Somewhere toward its foot, I discerned a human figure standing, as it seemed to me, within the rainbow, though unconscious of his position. He was gazing fixedly at something in the sand. Eventually, he stooped and flung the object beyond the breaking surf. I labored toward him over a half mile of uncertain footing. By the time I reached him, the rainbow had receded ahead of us, but something of its color still ran hastily in many changing lights across his features. He was starting to kneel again. In a pool of sand and silt, a starfish had thrust its arms up stiffly and was holding its body away from the stifling mud. It's still alive, I ventured. Yes, he said. And with a quick yet gentle movement, he picked up the star and spun it over my head and far out into the sea. It sank in a burst of spume, and the waters roared once more. It may live, he said, if the offshore pull is strong enough. He spoke gently, and across his bronzed, worn face, the light still came and went in subtly altering colors. He's almost describing what? An angel, an apparition? This is Eiseley's gift as a writer. There are not many come this far, I said, groping in a sudden embarrassment for words. Do you collect? Meaning collect stuff off the beach. Only like this, he said softly, gesturing amidst the wreckage of the shore, and only for the living. He stooped again, oblivious of my curiosity, and skipped another star neatly across the water. The stars, he said, throw well. One can help them. Somewhere far off the coast wandered the star thrower beneath his rainbow. Our exchange had been brief because I had nothing to say. The star thrower was mad, and his particular acts were a folly within which I had not chosen to associate myself. I was an observer and a scientist. Nevertheless, I had seen the rainbow attempting to attach itself to Earth. On a point of land, as though projecting into a domain beyond us, I found the star thrower. In the sweet rain-swept morning, that great many-hued rainbow still lurked and wavered tentatively beyond him. Silently, I sought and picked up a still-living star, spinning it far out into the waves. I spoke once briefly. "I understand," I said. "Call me another thrower." Only then I allowed myself to think, he is not alone any longer. And after us, there will be others. Isley is saying, in contrast to the consultants who have mistold his tale, that it is collective effort rather than individual effort that makes a difference. Not hapless heroism, but cultural change. Letting nature use us with our knowledge, we can do something together for that larger commonweal that includes our non-human neighbors. And I remind you of Finn's name for this, the method by which this cultural change can occur: relentless incrementalism. May we collectively find that way forward. Amen.
And now, I'd like to invite Kaylee to come back and extinguish the chalice as we say our closing words together. Go out into the world in peace, have courage, hold on to what is good, return to no person evil for evil, strengthen the faint-hearted, support the weak, help the suffering, honor all beings,
And honor also your part in nature's intricate web.